Is Shai a straight up lock?
Yeah.
So what do you think makes him a straight up lock?
I think he's probably a first team guy this year.
But like, what about his numbers? Do you think? Because when you look at where they are, they're obviously they've overachieved, and this is a team that's likely going to make the play-in game. But it's still it's not too dissimilar from the conversation we would have. I mean, I guess it's the same thing with Luka. They're in the same boat, but it's like it's not a championship contender.
Portland's not good. I just want to say that. And I know we had a little bit of an argument a couple weeks ago on this show on Old Man the Three Things about them, whether or not they underachieved or overachieved, whatever it may be. They came in with no expectations, at least from my vantage point. If they ended up in the play-in, that was an overachievement. They're not going to end up in the play-in. Their margin for error was so slim. Dame would probably have to play in every game and play 40 minutes a night and do what he's done for them to be essentially a 7 or 8 seed. I mean, that to me is their best case scenario with that roster. It's a similar conversation with the Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat, right? It's like they underperformed. They're still got a winning record. Jimmy's been awesome. I feel like he deserves a spot. Again, not saying I'm voting for him or anything. He's been penciled in. The reason I say Shai, 0 expectations. 0. I mean, ESPN analytics had them projected with like a 0.1% chance of making the playoffs. And here we are with 5-6 games to go for all these teams, and they're right there. And who has been the primary driver of that overachievement, that exceeding expectations? It's been Shai. And like I said, 5th in the NBA in win shares. I think if I'm not mistaken, I think he's like 4th or 5th in win shares per 48. Maybe even 3rd. I don't know. He's in the top 3 or 4 in win shares per 48. So you watch them play, and this is when analytics match up with the eye test. Like they win and they're in games because of Shai. Yeah. And again, he's a top 5, been a top 5 scorer in the NBA all season. Good floor game. Efficient, 62.5 true shooting percentage, a career high. They win when he's on the floor. Like, I don't know how he wouldn't be a lock.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people feel like, I feel like a lot of people feel like, especially with the Steph games played and the Warriors not being as good as everyone expected, I feel like a lot of people feel like he's a first teamer along with Luka probably. That's kind of where I'm at with that.
I could see. It's a little strange to me to have your first team All-NBA guards be 10th and 11th in the West.
But it's a little strange to me that we're talking about this and Booker's played 49 games, Curry's played 51, Josh played 57.
Yeah.
I think that factors into it because I think those 3 guys have all had fantastic seasons. Ja's team in particular has had a really good season. They're 37-20 when he plays. You mentioned their numbers. When he didn't play, they're a shade over 500. And Booker's numbers are obviously good when he plays. I just don't – it'd be a stronger argument, I think, if Steph and Booker for first team were 63 to 65 games played and their teams overall had a winning margin like the Kings or – like the Grizzlies. That's to me is the, and so like that brings up Ja. Like, where do you sort of factor him in all of this? Because if we're gonna say 55 games played is the thing, and he's at 57 now, and they're 37-20, and he's having a good year, and particularly his net rating is outstanding, almost a positive 8 per 100. Like, that guy's impacted winning.
He's out for me.
He's out for you.
He's the only one who's a clear out.
Is that because of the off-court stuff?
The off-court stuff is a part of it because I think that's self-inflicted, unlike an injury. I think it's self-inflicted, and I think especially in a race this competitive and this close, that matters. And the other thing is we talked to them on the show last week. They're still really good without him.
Yeah.
I mean, they're 11-8. The record's 11-8 without him, but even just the eye test looking at it, it's like they didn't miss a beat when he was gone the last month. And so that's a tribute to that organization and what they've put in place there. But he's an incredible player, and he'll make a lot of All-NBA teams. I just don't think this year he should be on it.
I think there's some nuance to any argument you make for any player. And there's also it's not hypocrisy. To me, it's not hypocrisy to look at Dame and say his team sucks, but the guy deserves a spot on the All-NBA. I don't think that's hypocrisy. And then to turn around and argue for the third player here, who I think at this point in time, at Friday at 12:57,
I can't figure this out. I can't guess.
To say, I think I always go back to this. Like, to me, and this is not. I by the way, I'm killing my own chances of ever making, of ever having an All-Star appearance. To me, an All-Star game is like, I want the 24 best fucking players. If they're healthy, give me the 24 best players. I don't really care about a team's record at the All-Star break. Should we reward a couple guys maybe that are the Robins and they're having great? Yeah, get them in, man. Get them in. Do I think like the first place team should get 4 guys in and the fourth guy is averaging 13 and 5? No, I don't. I don't feel that way. I feel like I want the 24 best players. When I get to All-NBA, it's a little more nuanced to me. I want the best players and I want the guys that have had individually great seasons, but I also want to reward the guys because the All-NBA tells as much of a story about that season as anything, about that regular season as anything.
Yep.
And who has been the best team in the regular season this year?
In general?
Yeah, well, I got the standings right
Milwaukee?
here. Yeah, Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And who has been, besides Giannis, the two guys are Brook Lopez and Jrue.
Yep. I like the Jrue.
And when you factor in his defensive prowess, I don't care what the fucking RPM, EPM, fucking all that shit. I don't care.
Yeah, the players say it on this
defensive
show
box plus minus.
Constantly.
Like there's sometimes when the eye test doesn't meet analytics.
Yep.
He is, to me, the best guard defender. And they have had and they've had all season a top 2 or 3 defense. Now they've fallen off actually over the last 15 games. I think they're 15th in the NBA in defense over the last 15. But Jrue, to me, has as strong of a claim to an All-NBA guard spot as any of the guys we mentioned. And I tend to tilt a little bit because of all these problems, right? It's kind of like the MVP conversation that we had where we kind of broke down, hey, here's a case for this guy, and here's maybe why you would consider someone else, right? In this case with Jrue, here's a case for him. Good counting numbers, efficient, all that stuff. On top of that, his team is 47-17 when he plays.
Best three-point shooting of his career, I think. 38%.
Yeah. And he's at 58.3 true shooting, 7.3 assists. I don't know.
I think it's a good pick. Makes sense to me. I test matches that too because every other night it's like he had 50 the other night. It's like every other night you see Jrue going off for like 42. And it's not what you think when you think of his game, but they've needed him to do it because of all the issues they've had with the shooting and the backcourt.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about their offense all season and Giannis having at times to do a little bit more, and really for the first time in like 6 or 7 years had like a drop in efficiency numbers. And Jrue, on the other hand, has been awesome offensively all season. They haven't shot the ball well as a team from 3. In particular, like Connaughton got off to a really bad start, picked it up a little bit, hasn't been great. Middleton, of course, has only played an X amount of games. He's missed a ton of time, hasn't shot the 3 well. So they've had all these factors, yet they're still the number 1 team. And Jrue, I think, is as much a part of that as Giannis or Brook. Yeah. And so I feel like there's a reward for that. And I think Jrue will make, and I'm not saying I'm voting for him, at 1:01 p.m. on Friday. I think Jrue will make an all-defensive team. I think that's going to happen, but I as of today, he's got a strong case for an All-NBA spot as a guard.
Yeah, and he should be. I mean, we should be rewarded for the. That would be my issue with Fox. I mean, Fox is deserving, obviously, in a ton of ways for being in this conversation, but defensively, I just don't. I think that you have to consider that in a way. To your point, it makes less of a difference in the All-Star game than it does for All-NBA.
Yeah, it does. And I again, because whatever Jason decides to break out, somebody's fan base,
Someone's going to get mad.
Somebody's fans are going to get mad here and tell me why I'm wrong, and that's fine. I can be wrong.
Likely Philly.
You probably don't have a vote. You probably don't have a vote. But here's the thing. It's the same thing I argued last week. Is like all these guys are deserving in some capacity. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about them. Yeah. It's not disrespecting them. All these guys are very deserving.
Is this the hardest recent guard in particular selection you can remember, or is it always like this and it's like recency bias?
I don't think it's always like this. I think what makes it hard is like in general. I just remember because I read Zach Lowe. I read the Ringer stuff. I'll read if Howard Beck has a vote. I see what he's tuned into and why he picked what he picked. And a lot of times it's very easy to just be like, hey, this guy was kind of out of the conversation because he only played in 52 games. And this year we're talking about a bunch of guys that have, as of right now, have played between 49 and 54 games.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it tough. And that's why I say, like, we should, reward winning, reward individual greatness. Let's reward availability. Let's do that. If there's a little tiebreaker here, like, and that's why I think Fox has a case. Not just because he's been great and because they've won. The guy's played in 68 games so far as of Friday at 101.
Yep.
103 now.
Yep.
If you want to watch the rest of the episode, check out The Old Man of the Three Things, available exclusively on Amazon Music.